Paranormal Road has been brought to you by EVP Mediums. Visit us at evpmediums.com, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Exploring unknown regions of our reality.
And she looks out and sees these lights in the sky and these different patterns drifting like they were going to land.
Examining the depths of human perception.
I remember when I was awake and I realized I was awake, I started to sort of scan the room and I realized that something was wrong.
Pursuing the elusive and unseen.
Electronics started acting up, ceased to work, overheated.
You have just entered a road of wondrous mystery.
And so when we get around this bend in the road and this group of trees, we look up in the sky and there's this craft, and it is huge.
A place where sometimes our darkest terrors dwell.
I've never seen anything like this, and instantly I could feel the fear.
You've just turned on to the Paranormal Road. Paranormal Road.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
And welcome to Paranormal Road. This is David.
And I'm Randy.
And tonight we have the honor of having Joyce.
Oh, this time I didn't have to introduce myself. Thank you, Dave.
Oh, you're so welcome. Joyce has actually done an outstanding job because we have an exciting show for you tonight. We have, not only do we have in this show the Haddox report coming up very shortly, but when we get into after the first segment, we have Katrina Weidman on.
And everyone probably knows her from Paranormal Lockdown, although she's done other things. But we talk about some of the shows that they've done with Paranormal Lockdown. We talk about some of the other things that she has going on. We talk about her new show. And we talk about how she got started in things. So it was a fun interview. She pretty much is what you see is what you get, which is always refreshing.
Yeah, it is.
Because as we know on some of these television shows, they don't edit them. They don't have control over the content, and sometimes they're all over the place. But
she was a pleasure. She really had her act together. Interviewing her, even though Joyce wouldn't let me interview her.
I'm sorry, Randy.
I did get to listen quietly.
As did I.
Yeah, but it was great. I really liked it.
When it came to this interview, it made sense to have one person interview Katrina simply to keep the interview rolling and to really get a lot of the questions that you as listeners may have. Hopefully we touched upon a lot of those, and you can that you would get a different sense or learn more about Katrina. So in order not to mess it up with having me and Randy and Joyce and multiple people kind of like ganging up on her per se, I'd like to say we drew straws for this.
No, I took it. I wanted to take it.
There were no straws. Joyce took it.
Joyce kind of like
she's been stalking her for months.
Yeah,
no, wait a minute.
When we brought up this idea, I mean, literally, Joyce pushed Randy and I down. I mean, Randy bruised his knee.
It was a body slam. It wasn't a push. It was a body slam. She just took it.
When I started doing things with EVP Mediums, she was one of the few women who was an investigator and not a psychic. There's quite a few women you see as psychics, but there aren't a whole lot you see as investigators. So she was one of the people that I noticed first on Paranormal Lockdown, and then I realized she had done a show earlier, Paranormal State, when they were doing reruns, and so that's when I realized that she had been doing this a while, and she was somebody I could kind of watch her evolution over time, which is always interesting to me. To me, that's how you kind of learn. But so yeah, I have to admit, I do feel kind of like a stalker. I've been all over her social media, and of course, I've been trying to catch up on any episodes that I might have missed or episodes that I really liked that I wanted to see again. So I kind of feel like I'm stalking Nick Groff too, but really I've been hanging out with Katrina for a while, and so I already felt a little bit like I knew her, but and I was happy to do it all by myself because it is really difficult to do a phone interview when you can't see somebody's facial expression. You can't figure out when they're going to pause. You can't. I mean, I'm looking at Dave right now. I know if I stop, he's going to see and talk. That's hard to do when you're on the phone. So, so I got to do the thing myself, and I thank you, Randy, for giving me that opportunity. It was very.
I wish you could see her facial expression right now.
It's angelic.
I wish you could see his.
Yeah. I wish I could say it was sincere, but
I just got holes burned in my head from his eyes.
It was nice enough, but yeah, she did at one point kind of raise her hand up off the paper, and I snatched it out from under her hand.
He passed
and
me
wrote
notes.
a couple of notes on it that she totally ignored.
That is not true.
It was like, this is my interview. Shut the hell up. I'm doing it.
Randy and I actually get along very well. Where is this hostility coming from, Randy?
You took the interview.
Oh, okay. Well then, tough shit. Oop. I mean, too bad.
Well, what was, I think, really neat about the interview is you being part of EVP Mediums and being a paranormal investigator yourself. I mean, you had a lot in common, and there were several times that we were watching you and given Katrina's responses, it hit home with you. It was like, yeah, this is, and as well as with Randy and I.
It did with us too, because when she started talking about how things happen and played out in some of the investigations, it made a lot of sense to us because we've had similar situations out there. And when someone else is doing investigations similar to the way you do it, it makes you feel like, hey, maybe we're all doing this thing the way we're supposed to.
Right.
Or when they come to the same conclusions that you kind of come to. Yeah. Different circumstances, but you kind of process the information the same way and come to the same conclusion. So it's always good. The paranormal field, there's a lot of people who think they know, but there's a lot of stuff you just can't know for sure.
Right. And I really thought, that's what I really liked about Katrina. Is in my book, she's a class act. I mean, I loved her approach. I love how she reasons things, how she looks at things, how she's sensitive to not only her clients, but also takes the spirits into consideration. Just a top-notch class act. But we can go on and on and on about this. But it's best that you hear that interview yourself. But first, we have the Haddox report coming up. And then after that, we will be getting on to part 2 of Paranormal Road.
All right.
And can't wait to get that going.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
Professional UFO investigator and special assignment reporter for Paranormal Road. It's the Haddox Report.
This is William Haddox with the Haddox Report, and I've got a very interesting case to bring to you this week, one that I've been investigating for the past several days. I first learned about this from a local online newspaper that we have in the area called Scioto Post. They were the first to pick up the story, and then I kind of ran with it from there. It all started March the 27th, 2019, at approximately 8:40 p.m. The location was a southern part of Ohio, the Ross County area. Buzzard's Roost is a nature preserve that has a high vantage point, and that is actually where the video was taken at, and the original witness. That's where they were located. What makes this case very interesting is a couple of things. One, actually having video, which is kind of a rare thing in and of itself, at least for the area. Two, it's a military operations zone, so generally things like this are very easy to solve. I can make a few phone calls to the, suspected people, and usually get an answer within a day or so. Not a big deal. I've done this numerous times. Well, in this particular case, you can see the video which is linked on my website, Central Ohio UFO Reporting Center.us. If you go to the website, in the upper right corner of the homepage, you will see most recent reports. You can read the report there, and at the upper right of that page, it will say images, and there you can watch the video. It's about 30 seconds long. No audio. But the video looks to me exactly like a military aircraft dropping flares. Like I said, that's a fairly common occurrence for this area and for that location. It is a military operations zone. Now comes the odd part. There was only one plane in the area. This was also called in to the Highway Patrol as a possible plane crash, which was heavily investigated that night, but obviously turned up nothing. So I called all the usual suspects, all the bases and everybody around the area. This is the first time they have all denied to me any aircraft in the area. They said they were not even flying at night that particular week. I've called air traffic control, even went as far as calling NORAD and the Pentagon themselves. This was quite odd as well. They both seemed very receptive and willing to talk until I mentioned flare drops. Then I got the same story from both locations. Well, we cannot track aircraft that is not ours. We use the FAA and other means to find out what was in the area, but we do not track anything unless it's directly ours, and they both said they had nothing of theirs in the area. The FAA did not even want to speak with me. So something very odd, is going on. I'm not necessarily trying to get conspiracy theorists and cover-ups and things of that sort, but it's just a very odd, not normal responses that I typically would receive in something like this. Like I say, normally they are very cut and dry instances, and I will read the actual witness report. Of course, like I say, everything is 100% confidential, but I was given permission to post it on the site, and it's case number L741B, and like I said, it was March 27th, 2019, Chillicothe, Ohio. The description of the event was, I was at the top of Buzzard's Roost in Chillicothe, and the thing was flying away from me, then turned around and got super close. It was flying low and slow, then it let out the flares, or whatever it did, twice at least, which you can see in the video. I only got it one time on the film, then it flew far away, and about 10 minutes later flew back over top of me. Time of the event was 8:41 p.m., and you can see the attached video. There was numerous other witnesses that saw the same craft. Some said it turned in a large circle and made several passes. There are other videos as well, but I have not got in touch with those witnesses to have permission to use it, but I do have the one. They're all basically the same videos at just different angles, but it's a very odd, like I said, case. It made some national radio, which was Clyde Lewis at Ground Zero, has a show out of Washington State, I do believe. Portland, Oregon. But you can find him on Ground Zero if you look it up. Very interesting show, to say the least. But our local newspaper, the Soda Post, would give an interview there, as well as Peter Davenport, who I have actually personally spoke with from the National UFO Reporting Center. And he was concurring with me that it definitely looks like a plane doing flare drops that they do for missile maneuvers, anti-missile maneuvers. But like I said, when things like this normally go on in the area, it's very easy to confirm. And I've checked with every place possible, even bases that use this area but are not even in the state. The Ohio National Guard, everybody that was possible to be checked with, I did, and everybody has come up with the same answer. There was a local newspaper in Vinton County, where this was also sighted at the same time. The counties are close together. And they got the same exact response the local paper there did. They came up with nothing, and they called the same places I did. I called some places they didn't, but at least every place I checked, I confirmed everything that they had said. And nobody wants to admit anything, and nobody seemed to care, which I thought was quite odd as well. No one really worried about it. I got the same answer from pretty much everybody. They keep track of their own aircraft and don't worry about too much else after that. So, like I say, very odd case. And if anybody happens to be from the Southern Ohio area that's listening to this podcast, if you saw it or have any information whatsoever, please get in touch with me at Central Ohio UFO Reporting Center.us, or you can send a message to Paranormal Road through Facebook. Either way, will get in touch with me. If it's something very urgent that you need to get in touch with me on the website now, I do have a Skype number. So if anybody needs to call for something that maybe you can't fill out the report for some reason, or whatever the case may be, if you need to get in touch quicker, you can do that. And if for some reason I can't answer, there is an option to leave a voicemail if you want to go into more detail or something that just doesn't fit into the standard form that I have. You can feel free to do that, and I will contact you within 24 hours. And something I want to add to this, this worked out one positive thing. There was a listener that got in touch and was asking about my involvement with law enforcement and how I handle things, as far as law enforcement is concerned. Well, I wasn't able to get an actual interview with law enforcement as of yet. I'm still working on that. But what I did get was a short statement from the 180th Fighter Wing out of Toledo, Ohio, from their public relations Staff Sergeant Shane Hughes. He allowed me to quote him, and this is not an exact quote, but this is the gist of what he had sent me. I asked him the simple question of, what do you guys do? What is your protocol if somebody calls in a UFO, an unknown, flying object? Now, granted, UFO does not necessarily mean alien or anything of the sort. It's just something in the sky that whoever saw it can't identify. Plain and simple. So I asked him what their protocol was, and this is what he told me. He said, basically, what we do whenever someone like myself calls in, he checks first to find out if they were even flying that night. And if they were, then he would take down my information, get in touch with the ones that were in charge of flight control and anybody that is involved in flight ops, find out if their aircraft was in the area or not, and they would call me back and let me know one way or another if that was their jet in the area, or if they were in maybe a different area, or if they knew maybe by chance, which they don't check into a lot, but if they had any idea if it could have been another base. But normally they just check to see if it was theirs in the area, and they let me know one way or another that yes, we were flying at that time at that location, or no, we were not. And that's about the extent of what they would tell me as far as an unidentified flying object is concerned. And I've ran into that more than once. But before I said a whole lot, even though that's all public information, I wanted to have a name and a base and everything to attach it to before I went to public with any information. But that's basically the information I get from every base that I call. But in every case I've dealt with anything similar to this in the past, I've been able to ask a few basic questions from the usual suspects, the different bases around, and before it was said and done, somebody would end up saying, yes, that was us. We were there doing flight ops, routine training, and that's the end of it. Case closed. But in this particular case, I've been denied by every single person that I've spoke with. The military bases have at least been helpful. They've checked with things, called me back, tried to find out what they could. NORAD, Pentagon, FAA, they don't want to say anything. What, do they know anything? I can't say for sure one way or another, but definitely something very odd, because there was a change in attitude and tone of conversation when I went a little further into what was actually seen, as far as the flare drops, things of that sort. So that's pretty much what I've got for this week. I want to give a little teaser to the next Haddox report. I will have a guest coming on. Project Blue Book. I'm sure some of you may be familiar with back in the 50s and 60s when the U.S. Air Force was investigating UFO cases around the country. They got, I believe it was over 12,000 reports. 701 are still labeled as an unknown, and it was a series that just recently wrapped up its first season on the History Channel, which you have to take that with a grain of salt, but it is what it is. But my next guest that I'm going to have on the next episode of the Haddox Report will be a good friend of mine who lives in Dayton, Ohio, named Rob Mercer. And I'm going to let him tell his story. He has a direct involvement with Project Blue Book, but it's not in a way that any of you will probably ever be able to guess or even have an idea of. It's something totally different than the norm, but a very interesting story, to say the least, and it's something I've personally verified, so there is no doubt, one way, shape, or form, of anything that he will tell you, and that will be on the next episode of the Haddox Report. Just wanted to throw a little teaser out there. So that's what I've got for this particular episode. So as always, stay safe and keep looking up.
And we will be back on the Paranormal Road in a few moments with Katrina Whiteman.
Good evening, everybody, or morning or afternoon or whatever, it doesn't matter. We are Graveyard Tales. Now, if you like ghost stories, hauntings, cryptid encounters, and the weird history behind them, then you should join us in the graveyard.
You can find us on any of your favorite podcast providers. Check out our website at graveyardpodcast.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter at GRV. Just go search Graveyard Tales.
That would be easier. Now, we hope to see you in the graveyard.
subscribe into Paranormal Road. Hi, Katrina.
Hey, Joyce. How you doing?
I'm doing great. This is kind of a treat for us. We don't get a lot of, and I'm going to call you a celebrity, and I know you're just a normal person, but we don't get a whole lot of celebrities. So most people probably know you from Paranormal Lockdown, and they may not know that that wasn't your first television show. And we're going to talk about all that and more, but why don't we start at the beginning? I know, reading some of the information from your website, that you actually grew up in a haunted house.
I did, yeah. There were two. So it was, the first house was, from the time I was born until I was, about 5 or 6. And the second house after that until, my parents still own it. So, the first house, I was very young, so I remember experiences like my sister having experiences, her telling me about them. We kind of had a shared experience in a way. And I also remember I had my own room, my own bed, everything like that, but I would never sleep in it. I mean, it was like a rarity for me to sleep in there. I was terrified to be upstairs by myself, and I would just cry and cry if they made me be in my room by myself or anything like that. And then the second house, there was a lot of things that happened, and nothing bad by any means, but just things like, lights going on and off, doors closing by themselves. And I remember distinctly there were many times where my mom would put down her car keys somewhere, and I would see her put down her car keys, and then she'd turn around and the car keys would be gone. And she'd be like, "What? Why are you guys playing games on me? Come on, I need the car keys." Blah 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 blah. And none of us would touch it. And then she'd go back to that spot later, and the car keys would be right there. She was tapped on the shoulder one time. So there was a lot of just weird occurrences that happened in that house. And interestingly enough, about, I would say 10, maybe 12 years ago, it started what we call the refrigerator ghost. And you hear somebody come through the back door, and there's wind chimes on the back door. So you hear the wind chimes, hear the door open, you hear it close, you hear somebody open the refrigerator and then walk through the dining room. And you're in the house, and you're like, who is that? And you go out, and nobody's there. The doors are locked. There's no car in the driveway. So, and multiple people have experienced that. Yeah, and it still happens. And a couple months ago, my mom actually saw a full figure in the dining room.
Oh, wow.
So it's interesting that it's I don't know what changed in that time period, but.
So this was totally normal for you.
Yeah, so it was always a part of my life. It was, and my parents didn't exactly encourage it, but they didn't deny it either. They didn't tell me it was stupid to believe this stuff. It was just sort of okay, well, yeah, that happens. And there were some times where they would kind of push back on, oh, well, that's just intuition. If I had a dream that would come true or something, they would downplay certain things, but we were never told that doesn't exist and you're stupid for believing it. And, they never discouraged it like that.
Did you ever investigate, after you became an investigator, the activity in the house?
No, because, the first house, I actually contacted the woman who owns it, and she's never had an experience. Huh. But, and she really didn't believe it was haunted, but then she did tell me the story. She also uses it for her business, and she had a client stay over. And I guess he contacted her the next day after he slept over, and he was like, you didn't tell me this house was haunted. And she was like, well, it's not, so I don't know what you're talking about. And he was like, well, I saw a man. I guess he saw a man standing in the doorway of his bedroom or walking down the hall. And what's interesting is my sister used to see that all the time. She would tell my mom she would see a tall, skinny man walking down the hallway to the bathroom. And so it's interesting because obviously this guy had no idea of our experiences. She had no idea of our experiences as far as the details of it. And this guy, 30 some years later is having the same experiences that my sister had.
Interesting.
So so it's really interesting. The other house, where my parents live now, they live there. So it's I don't really think anybody wants to get that close to it,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So it makes total sense then why the paranormal was so interesting to you. What was your first paranormal research team?
So I always it's interesting. I didn't join a team in college, but I always did it, you know, when I was a kid growing up, because I think I have a very similar story to a lot of investigators. You have these experiences and you can't explain them away. And I mean, there's some that you can explain away for sure, but then there's other ones and you're just sort of left with more questions than answers. And kind of the normal narrative we have in our culture is, you know, it doesn't exist. It's just folklore. It's stupid to believe this stuff. And that wasn't enough for me because I knew I experienced things that didn't make sense. And so I always researched this stuff growing up. I mean, I would get my hands on any book I could. I would kind of do like these investigations on my own, which, you know, they were just really like me hiding out in someone's basement with a camera and like, you know, but then when I went to college, that's when I joined the Paranormal Research Society. So that was like my first official group.
Okay. And that actually, in 2007 became Paranormal State, the television show. What did you learn being part of the society, and what did you learn from actually being part of a show that became a television show?
I learned a lot. I mean, I had a lot of hands-on contact with the clients. I was not during season 1 because I was new.
Yeah, I saw you had the trainee tag.
Yeah, I started out as a trainee, you know, but once we moved past the first 13 episodes for season 1, then I started having more client contact because that's very natural for me. And it's something I really enjoyed doing, talking to the clients and interviewing them. And, you know, so I think I learned a lot of skills that way. And it also inspired me to go into crisis counseling. So I would, luckily we lived in a town that had a very well-known crisis center, and they offered training to become a volunteer crisis counselor. And I noticed when I was like, you know, talking to clients, there was a lot of things I didn't really know how to handle. As far as, you know, when a client is telling me that they're having anxiety or depression or they're suicidal because of things going on in their house. And so it really inspired me to get involved with crisis counseling. So I think that, you know, was really my biggest takeaway. And of course, just being more objective. You know, I think when I was growing up, and the things that I was learning about the paranormal, I kind of had the same belief that I think a lot of people have before they really delve into it, that a haunting is, you know, somebody who died and they came back and they're stuck here for some reason. I mean, that was my belief before I really delved deep into it. And, you know, going through all the cases we work, because there's a very high volume of cases, you know, you kind of learn that's not the case. You know, there's a lot of different moving parts in the paranormal, specifically when it comes to hauntings. And not all of it is paranormal. Some of it's psychological. Sometimes it's environmental. We had one case where it ended up being that they had a slow leak of carbon monoxide in their house.
Gosh.
And yeah, so, you know, it puts you in that, in a different, frame of mind. And, you know, so I learned some very valuable skills working there. And as far as the television stuff goes, I was a theater major and I grew up in the arts, you know, so I always did music. I always did acting. So I kind of already had like a good basis of like how to at least communicate your feelings, you know, outwardly, you know. But I think I learned more of like the production side, you know, cause I do produce. And so and producing was never something I thought I would get involved with until I started doing it for Paranormal State and realized I really liked it. Because, you know, I have like control issues. So, like, you know, producing is very much about like putting it all together and putting the puzzle pieces together. So, I really enjoyed that. So
that's kind of interesting. So you actually have, I love the crisis counseling standpoint. You know, a lot of people who, like you said, have a paranormal experience actually have other stuff going on. Sometimes it's not paranormal at all. So that's really interesting. So was your next show then Paranormal Lockdown?
It wasn't actually.
Okay.
So I had a bunch of different gigs in between Paranormal State and Paranormal Lockdown. But show-wise, television shows, I did a show called Real Fear.
Okay.
And it was it was 2 specials. It was supposed to be a series, but the network at the time wasn't able to make that happen. So then it just sort of, you know, kind of faded away. but it was, and I loved the concept of it. We took horror movies that were based on real life, and we explored and investigated the real life side of it. So, we interviewed the people that the movies were based off of. We tried to go back to the locations that they were based off of. And it was a really interesting thing because I'm a horror fan as well, so that kind of fit right in with me. But again, it just didn't work out. So then, then Nick and I connected and we did Paranormal Lockdown.
So you and Nick connected. So, Nick hasn't connected with me. So tell me how that all comes about and how you end up, because Paranormal Lockdown was, like David said, when we talked to you off mic, that's a show that we really liked, the flow, the format. You guys used a lot of technology. You seem to have a lot of respect for the spirits. So you are one of those shows, paranormal shows that's out there that's really well done. And I'm just wondering how that comes about, how you figure out the concept and how that moves forward.
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you. I know, everyone who worked on the show is very proud of it, myself included. So, it was really random. I had never met Nick at that point. I worked on Ghost Adventures, as a associate producer, and, but I never had contact with him. And then, just randomly, I got an email from him one day, and then I like that same day, I don't even know how he got my number. He got my number and he cold called me. And he was just like, hi. He's like, what are you doing? Are you under contract for anything? And we just had a really great conversation. I think we really connected as far as what our goals were with doing another television project. And he had already had the concept pretty much, it was 72 hours in these locations. But it's funny, and I always tease him about this, is that he didn't fully tell me that I would have to stay there too. So he was like, in our first conversation, he was like, I have to stay there, but you can leave. Like, you can go off and research if you need to, and you do whatever, but I have to stay there. I'm like, okay. And then as the months and months got closer to us filming, he would drop little hints that I wasn't leaving. And so the day I left, I still really didn't know. I'm like, I don't really understand what's going on. So, and he's like, well, if I told you, you wouldn't have stayed. So we kind of joke about that stuff. But, that's how it started. It was, he and the other executive producer, Justin, they had this concept, and, the network bought it, and then they needed a co-host, and they looked at a bunch of people, and, Nick and I just naturally just kind of got along. So it just made sense.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk about a few of the episodes. I think I've seen them all, some of them more than once, but we are here in Ohio, and you had several investigations in Ohio, including the Higginsport School, which was on the last season, the Bel Air House, and close to us here, Franklin Castle. Nick had done a little 10-minute productions about the scariest places, and he did one with where you got the best evidence, and Franklin Castle made that list. Just as an aside, it'd be kind of fun to know what you thought of that investigation, and maybe comment on how important it is to talk to former residents, like when you talk to the Romanos, the kids who grew up in the house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with them. I think Franklin Castle had some of the best evidence we've ever captured, because it's visual, and it's, I think one of the criticisms that we get in the paranormal field, right, and I think everyone can relate to this, is that the equipment that we use doesn't necessarily prove there is a ghost, right?
Right.
It doesn't.
Right.
It proves that something is happening. So, for example, like a REM pod, if that goes off and and we rule out all the natural causes, does that mean there's a ghost? Well, no. It means that something is happening that we can't explain. And if we're going with the thought that ghosts can, set those things off, then okay, maybe it is. It's something to take into account, but it doesn't definitively prove anything. And what I think is really important about visual evidence is that, there's what we captured at Franklin Castle was kind of like this shadowy mist. There is no way to explain that. I'm left empty-handed when it comes to something like that. And I think that's why it's so important, because it's also something that people describe. as far as like, I went there, I saw this with my eyes, you know, and then we were able to capture it. So I think it's really important, that piece of evidence. And I think, you know, as far as talking to past residents, that's always one of the first routes we try to go, is to contact people that have lived there or spent a lot of time in a location, because although you have to be careful with eyewitness accounts as far as, I mean, we know not everybody's memory is accurate when it comes to events. And we know that their own perceptions and deeply held religious beliefs will kind of shape how they talk about an experience. It's still really important, especially the Romanos, who had so much contact with this, you know, spirit of a little girl.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just them, it was their whole family. So, you know, it becomes invaluable information because it can kind of help you, like, is this all hype, or did they really have these experiences? What was the pattern? Like, was there a family fight that happened and then they would have these experiences? When would this person, like, when would the spirit show up? When would they have these experiences? So it really helps you kind of shape the investigation as far as what do we do for the best possible shot of getting and documenting objective evidence.
Yeah, and I think your investigation there really brought that home, because you did get better evidence, kind of knowing where to focus your energy.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of that is gut instinct too. You know, there's certain places you go, and if you're open to it and you kind of like allow your gut to lead you, I think it always leads you right where you need to be.
Yeah, we're actually interviewing the author of Haunted Franklin Castle here later this month, so we'll be talking about that quite a bit.
Nice.
Another episode that actually I saw an outtake with you in it, which is one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it, but Kreitzer Mansion in New York, Randy and Dave, the other side of Paranormal Road is EVP Mediums, and we're a paranormal group here. It was before I joined, but they actually went to the Kreitzer Mansion and they filmed a pilot. So I had already seen the one where you and Nick went, but an outtake caught my eye. And if I remember correctly, you were touched, and you weren't just touched. Someone like grabbed your elbow. I remember you jumping.
Yeah. I felt, and you know, I go back and forth with this one in my head, and I think that happens a lot with me. I'm very like skeptical of my own experiences. You know, so, but it felt like someone grabbed my elbow. And I do go back and forth with this experience because it felt like that, but I'm like, is there something that could have happened in my body to make that feeling, to make me think it was that? But it did feel like something grabbed my elbow. I think my more prominent experiences there, and I think these are more objective, I was sitting up in, I can't remember I think it's the blue room is what they call it, the blue-green room.
Okay.
It was where Nick slept on the first night, and we were separated. I was sitting there in a chair just asking questions, and I didn't see it, but I heard it, and it happened twice. Something got thrown in the next room. There's like this little side room next to that room, and the only things in there were batteries.
Wow.
So, yeah, but I mean, clear as day, something got thrown, you know, and it happened 2 times. So to me, those were more, I find that more interesting because, I mean, that's a physical object that's being thrown.
Right.
You know? Right.
Well, and I agree with you with the getting touched. It's just in that clip, you seem so surprised that something actually grabbed you that much.
Yeah. And I kept trying to debunk it. And Nick said the same thing. He's like, you were so thrown off. And like, it's one of those things. It's like, you know, you do this for so long that, I don't know, something that might scare a new investigator doesn't scare me.
Right.
You know, because I'm like, yeah, I've done that like 100 times. Like it doesn't scare me anymore, you know, but, that's something that Nick kept saying. He's like, you were so scared. He's like, I would find that really hard to believe that would just be something happening to you like naturally. And you would think that's paranormal.
Right.
But I'm very skeptical of my own experiences. I will always try to find a way to debunk it. To make sure I'm not labeling something paranormal when it's not, you know?
Right. And that's the best practice.
And there's more Katrina on the Paranormal Road right after this break.
If you're into the paranormal, the weird, the unexplained, tune into the new hit radio talk show on Odyssey Internet Radio, Paranormal Road. Every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m., Dave and Randy explore various paranormal topics with featured guests and audience stories. Have you had a paranormal experience? Crossed paths with the dogman? Experienced a haunting? Owned a haunted object? Or perhaps had a UFO encounter? If you have had a paranormal experience and would like to be a guest on Paranormal Road, please contact us. Send us an email outlining your experience and be sure to include your contact information. Our email contact information is podcast@evpmediums.com. Again, podcast@evpmediums.com.
So in my humble opinion, your investigation at the Monroe House in Hartford City, that was those two investigations you did a follow-up, especially the first one, that is paranormal investigation at its best. You know, you followed the evidence down to the basement crawl space. And why don't you explain what you found and what happened when you found it?
Yeah, so, Nick went into the crawl space, and there were two mounds that he saw. And I think he described them as being like 6 foot long, and they were definite mounds. And so he started to brush away, the debris, and he found two bones. One he said looked like the cap of a skull. The other one looked like an arm bone. And at that point, just legally, we can't do anything else. So on that first investigation, he got out, and we called the cops. And it's interesting because the cops weren't it was really bizarre because they didn't seem really surprised. We were it's like 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning or something. We're like, we just found what we think are human remains in the basement of this house. And they were like, yep, okay, give me the address. And I'm like, how much does this happen in this town where it's like, this isn't a shock to you? So then when we went back, we had spoken with NYU anthropologists there, and they all agreed that it looked human in nature, and to the point where they were even able to give us an age.
Oh.
Yeah, they believe based off the arm bone, it was male and late teens, so like 17.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, and I know the doctor we had spoken to also consulted with other people, his colleagues, and they all agreed on that. So, when we went back, when we spoke to Eddie, and Eddie's a great person, we love Eddie dearly, and what I'm about to say, I don't mean to show any disrespect to him, but when he had the cops come over, it's our belief that they didn't look at the correct bones, because there were animal bones down there as well.
Okay.
And we believe that they looked at animal bones because they never went into the crawl space. And to see the human bones, you actually have to crawl in.
Yeah,
and
I remember that. That was not easy. Nick was kind of squished in there. So, yeah, that was not. You were smart not to crawl under there.
Well, I also had, I'm trying to think, was that when I had a sprained ankle? I think that's I sprained my ankles a few times on that show.
I remember a sprained
wrist. That was why I couldn't go in.
Right.
Oh, I know. I've hurt myself a lot. There were many hospital trips I had to take from that show. So it was our belief that they didn't see the right bones, and there's a lot of legalities there too. If the bones are more than 100 years, then it becomes an archaeological dig. If they're less than 100 years, then it becomes a crime scene. And, that's, it can be at the expense of Eddie.
Right.
So there's I think he's very cautious about what to do with that. But, my standpoint is, okay, it could be Native American, absolutely. And maybe it's just, our archaeological at that point. But my whole thing is, I'm like, what if it's not? And that's someone's kid who's been missing.
Right.
For 40 years or something. I mean, I think that story deserves closure.
Well, in the spirits.
And unfortunately, Yeah, and you don't know until you actually have somebody dig and figure out what happened.
Yeah, I mean, the spirits were clearly leading you there, and on your return trip, they clearly led you to the backyard.
Yeah, and we had something that didn't make that episode. The person we brought out to do the imaging of the ground, he's like the best in the country, because there's a lot of controversy about that technology, ground penetrating sonar. There's a lot of controversy. And it doesn't always end up being accurate, but he is like one of the best in the country. And I can't remember the exact number, but he has successfully found something like, I want to say around 1,000 missing graves. So he has a high success rate. And the one area that was shown on television, he was absolutely sure. He's like, there's something buried here. From what I've seen in my work, this looks like it would be a body. No, what wasn't shown is that there were 3 spots under the patio that he believed were burials. And then there was another spot there's like a fire pit. He also believed that was a burial. Why that wasn't shown on the episode is because there wasn't enough time for him to fully diagnose it.
Right.
So he didn't feel comfortable saying it on television as 100%. Because he wasn't 100% sure, but in his best opinion, he believed those are also burials. Something else, and I don't know if this made it in the episode or not, I can't remember, but there is, towards the front of the house on the side, there's like a little garden, and there's these stones all in the garden. And some of the stones they look purposely shaped and rounded, like it's a broken headstone. So, it's possible that it could have been a grave at some point that, a cemetery at some point that people just forgot about. We've certainly seen that. And on the maps that we could get a hold of, it wasn't marked that way. But the maps we could get a hold of only went back to, I think, like the 1880s. So it's possible that it could be even older than that.
So, and that is exactly why I say that was like a really great job of paranormal investigating. I mean, you can only do so much, and if somebody doesn't act on the information, like you said, there's other concerns there too. But so just to round out our discussion on paranormal lockdown, you and Nick always struck me as a great team. I love the fact that you joked about his hair. That always kind of cracked me up. This is probably a good point to say that paranormal lockdown is not returning. Why don't you take a minute to talk about that?
Yeah. So Paranormal Lockdown has been officially canceled. And, as much to the dismay of everybody involved. And I put out a letter on my website just to kind of explain, because I know there was a lot of confusion about what's going on. And, I was talking about how when we first started, I think we all thought this would go on forever. But, when you start a television show, it's kind of bittersweet, because at some point it's going to end.
Right.
And once you get past that first season, because there's a lot of shows that don't even get past the first season, and we were fortunate enough to do that. But it's with the knowledge of knowing, okay, we probably realistically only have maybe another 3 or 4 to go, because that's kind of the lifespan of a show.
Right.
There's other shows that certainly succeed that. I mean, look at Ghost Adventures. They're on like season 18. Or something like The Simpsons, which is season 112, so there's certainly shows that surpass that, but it's not every show. And at the end of the day, it's really sad that, we didn't have more time, but it's also, I feel really grateful that we had the time we did. And we had so many people, that believed in us and, helped make that happen. And that includes like our fan base. Because, you don't have a show unless you have a fan base.
Right.
And we were really, really fortunate that our fans were so loyal and, tuned in every week. But at the end of the day, it just, I guess it wasn't written in the stars for us to go any further.
Right. Well, we don't have to wait long to see you back on the Travel Channel. You have a new show, Portals to Hell with Jack Osborne, which premieres this month, April 19th. So why don't you talk about how that came about, and really Portals to Hell? What are you thinking?
That's what my mom says. She's like, don't do it. She's like, you're gonna get sucked into hell. I'll never see you. So we did have a date change, so it's now April 26th.
Oh, okay.
So it's been pushed back a week. But yeah, it just really happened. Jack contacted me, and he's been in the paranormal for a long time too. He had another show years ago, and he actually used to watch Paranormal State. He was a big fan of Paranormal State. So, we knew of each other, but we had never met. And he was just like, I want to do this project. I would really love for you to come on board. And, we were talking about our views on the paranormal, because I'm very selective about television projects I do, in the paranormal. Because it's, I think, I don't know, it's actually, I do this, you know what I mean? So like,
right.
I'm not just like a talent who you can put on a television show and whatever. I'm an actual investigator. So, we talked a long time about what our goals were and why we would want to do this. And, we very much felt like we were in line with each other. And, we wanted to really explore some of these more sinister places, because they seem to be the places where people, I mean, you guys know as investigators that these are the places where people are like, I was pushed up against the wall, I was scratched, I had something thrown at me. And so it becomes this question of, well, what makes these places more active than, say, grandmom's house with like the little child spirit that runs around? Right. What is it about these places? That's kind of where all of this came from. It's that there's something different and unique about certain places as far as hauntings go. And we wanted to put ourselves in those situations to figure out why that was. Can we come up with answers? Can we document it? Or do we find that there's nothing? It's very just exploring that side of it.
Well, I think you're nuts, but that's okay. Well, you have other things going on, and I actually had no idea you did a blog called Haunted Kitchen, which is well done, until I was getting ready to interview you. And I did mark your shortbread recipe to make later. But why don't you why don't you talk about what you hope to accomplish with that?
Yeah. So Haunted Kitchen started, I actually wanted to do this like 10 years ago, and I just had to keep putting it on the back burner. But my family used to own a restaurant. My mom was a baker for a very long time. My great-grandfather was a pastry chef. So I learned how to bake from, I was probably like 4 or 5 when my mom taught me how to bake, and so it was just always something I did. And I was like, for me, when I go on vacation, I like to explore creepy places. And when I'm, reading about creepy places, especially like if it's a haunted restaurant or something, I'm like, that's so cool. I really want to go there. And, I would love to make something from their menu. And so that's really where it started. It's a deep rooted passion of mine. And I noticed other people had the same passion. So I thought I would, start it as a blog. And I definitely have plans to grow it, especially in the next year. And I'll have announcements with that as we get closer. But it's really just, I just love, obviously, the paranormal, and I love history, and I love food and cooking. And I'm kind of like the old lady in The Wedding Singer when she likes to watch him eat the meatball. Like, that is my favorite part. If I cook for you, I will stare at you and just like watch you eat it. It's just my favorite thing in the world. So it's just a very deep passion of mine, and we're having a lot of fun doing it, going to all these places and talking about the food and their paranormal experiences. And so it's monthly right now. And so we go in the blog, we go through the paranormal experiences and the history, and then we share a recipe connected to that place, so you can make it at home.
It's really fun. I have to say, I love the picture of you in the black dress floating in the kitchen. It just cracked me up.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
1950s pinup for sure, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was another thing I didn't know you were into. You have musical talent, and you're with a band called Away from 30. Did I get that right?
Yep. So I started, in college, my majors was technically integrative arts, but it was like, you kind of got to make up your own major. So I did music. And so my majors were in music and theater. And so when I was a kid, music has always been such a big part of my life. I started playing piano at a very early age, and I started writing my own songs at like 11. and it was just sort of, I think with, Paranormal State took up so much time that my musical aspirations kind of went to the back burner. And, over the last couple of years, I've really been working hard to get back involved in that. And so, away from 30, we're kind of going through some changes right now as far as, our band members and all that stuff. So I'll have more information, as I get closer to, as we kind of solidify things with that. But, we alternative rock band, and I'm working on new music right now. So hopefully, single and an EP out very, very soon.
Well, that would be fun. I know you have some events coming up, so if people want to see you or buy your CD, I'm sure wherever you appear, you have a CD ready to sell. Do you want to go through your?
Usually, yeah.
Do you want to go through the your upcoming? I've lost the word. Promotions.
Yeah. So we have my first two events coming up are in May. The first one is Midwest Parafest. That's in Toledo, Ohio, and that's May 11th. The next one is Para-Unity Expo. That's in New Jersey, and that's May 18th. After that, I'll be at Pennhurst in July. I'll be at Old South Pittsburgh Hospital in October. And then also be at the Old Mill Parafest in November, and that's in Dundee, Michigan. So there's a lot of opportunities. I'm totally hands-on with doing events. I take the time to talk to everybody who's in my line and, all that stuff. So I'm definitely available those weekends. And, then I'm trying to I just lost my train of thought, but.
Well, I'm sure you're going to be adding stuff. So if somebody wants to, they can.
There will probably be a few things being added. And then we also have, Jack and I have a lot of press coming up for Portals to Hell. So, there will be, more information coming out about that show. And, so I think people can look forward to seeing that.
Okay. So I have 5, I call them paranormal questions. This is something I would ask anybody. The first one would be, what do you do to protect yourself from hostile spirits?
It depends. I'm not a big believer that I have to do something every single time. If I start having things happen at home after an investigation, that's when I'll sage. That's when I'll kind of, meditate a little more. There's only been 1 or 2 times where I've needed to consult with somebody in the field. So I'm just sort of I kind of flow with it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't do anything really traditional though. I'm not a ritual person with that.
Okay. Is there somebody that you would like to work with that you haven't worked with yet?
In the paranormal field, I have been extremely blessed where I've really worked with pretty much everybody I could ever hope to work with. I worked with Lorraine Warren on and off for 10 years, so
it doesn't get better than that.
She would probably be at the top of So you can't beat Lorraine.
Okay, is there some place that you would like to investigate that hasn't been available to you?
I think there's a lot of places in the UK I would love to check out, and I always say Hawaii because it's Hawaii. And probably, honestly, if I could have access to the first house that I grew up in, I would love to run some experiments in there. And see if I could get any kind of response.
Okay. How about, have you connected with a family member or loved one?
Not that I know of, as far as experiments go or places I've been to. I've had personal experiences, some of which I believe were, past relatives, but never on an investigation.
Okay. And if you could put together any kind of paranormal show, your dream show, it would be exactly what you want it to be, what would it look like?
Well, I will let you know when that happens, because there's definitely a few I have in mind. So.
Well, that's great. Okay, so we're going to take a minute. If you want to remind everybody to visit your Facebook page, your Twitter, your Instagram, all your social media things. It's KatrinaWeidman.com.
Yeah, my website's KatrinaWeidman.com, and all of my handles for Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is at Katrina Weidman.
Okay, and it's really been a pleasure talking with you. Would you be willing to come on again with us maybe next season, and you can talk about portals to hell?
Sure, absolutely, would love that.
Okay, we're actually going to take I think the summer off, and then we're going to start recording again after that. So I have your email now, so I won't be shy emailing you and say, remember me? Would you be willing to come back on and talk to us about your new show? And I'm sure you'll have a whole bunch more things happening. You're really very industrious, so.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Well, it's been a pleasure to be on today, and I thank you guys for your time and asking me to be a part of it.
And we will be back on the Paranormal Road after this short break.
Don't let the negativity of today's world get you sidetracked from your life's journey. Visit It's Your Journey Metaphysical Store at 4750 Cleveland Road East in Huron, Ohio. It's Your Journey is more than a store. It's a place of healing and knowledge. It's Your Journey carries a wide variety of healing crystals and protection stones, salt lamps, books, incense, candles, essential oils, and more. It's Your Journey also offers Reiki, energy healing, personal readings, spirit releasement, and soul retrieval. Live out of the area? No problem. Visit It's Your Journey's website at itsyourjourney.com and shop online. Shipping available worldwide. Or call 419-433-0888. Don't let negative energy stop you. Take charge. It's your journey.
And welcome back to Paranormal Road.
That was a lot of fun. It's really, I'm not trained to interview, so it's really hard for me to interview somebody.
Oh, you did? Yeah, I think you did a great job
I
for
really,
not being trained.
I really tried to do a good job, but like I said, I was pretty much a stalker. When you have somebody that has a big body of work like this, you have to kind of figure out how you're going to fit it in. We had an allotted amount of time to talk to her. So you have to kind of figure out how you're going to fit all that in.
and you want to get the stuff that's like the really good stuff, you know,
juicy stuff.
Yeah, well, what I would want to know as somebody who watches her. So, you know, that's why I wanted to talk to her about, you know, how she began and got into everything, which was interesting. But I know there were a couple times that we all looked at each other. So why don't you both tell me what you thought was really interesting or that you learned about Katrina?
I thought it was interesting how she started off with that she grew up in a haunted house, which kind of sets the mood of why she got involved and how it progressed along through her life. The other reason that I think Dave and I kept making eye contact, besides the fact that you were just going on and on, was
wow, let it go, Randy.
Yeah, this is nice for a change. I'm not the subject of his banter.
Yeah, well, anyway, was how her approach was when she would talk about her approach with how she handled situations and how you would take into consideration your client and you didn't want to say or do things that might hurt their feelings, along with doing the investigation thoroughly. That means a lot to us because that's kind of how we want to do it when we're doing our investigations. We don't want to jump to conclusions. We don't want to say things that are going to hurt our client's feelings or even, you know, do anything that's going to cause more havoc with the spirit. And that's kind of the way I felt about it.
I felt the same way. I like I said before, I think she's a class act. I really like her thought process as far as how she went about, you know, again, taking into account, you know, the clients, their psychological state, what are they dealing with, as well as, you know, the spirits and what the spirits may be trying to communicate. I also really liked the fact that, again, she didn't just jump to conclusions. And I really liked, speaking about the Kreischer Mansion, that when you ask her about, you know, that moment when she was touched on the arm, I mean, on the show at the time, this was like, I got grabbed. But then she did what we do. We do the same thing. We start second guessing ourselves. Did that really happen? Did I really hear my name just being said? Which is good, because when you don't second guess yourself, then I think there's a problem. And I really like how she, again, looked at different angles. And I think that puts her really up there. You know, Randy and I, firsthand experience dealing with a television show, we know that you don't have full control over that show. And I think what we were told is it has to be television worthy, you know, but you know, given that, I think her and Nick on that show, you know, they're masterful at it. They were really good at it. It's an extremely entertaining show. And I really liked, as far as the show it goes, and I brought this up to her before we started the interview, where I got to actually speak for a change. But no, just kidding. Wow. I'm jumping on the Randy bandwagon.
And you wonder why I'm not here every week.
Yeah.
Or maybe you don't.
But I like the fact that they use a lot of technologies and they're always looking for something different. And I really like that. And it was really cool to hear about.
And the fact that she said, just because we use this equipment still doesn't mean that there's paranormal activity or that it's definitely a ghost. There could be other reasons that the machinery is acting the way it is, and it's our jobs, her job also, as investigators to figure that out.
And what I really liked is that she specifically named the REM pod. And I'm going to clue in people here, folks, on a little secret. The REM pod is so easily manipulated, and we found that out. And you don't see us use it that much. And if you see it in our investigations, that's because we're pretty well convinced that there is something paranormal or something out there that it is being spirit that are controlling it. But you remember the day that, you know, I got the REM pod and I was so excited because of this great device. It didn't take us long to realize that a simple cell phone can trigger the REM pod into action.
And the walkie-talkies.
The two-way walkie-talkies. And there was a television show, and it was not Paranormal Lockdown. But there was a television show I was watching, and I actually watched 2 episodes and thought, okay, this may have some promise. And they were going, they were in the kitchen, and in the hallway they had a REM pod, and they were like, "Oh, look, it's going off," and they were talking about the REM pod. But in this show, the producers didn't edit out the shadow that was being cast on the wall, and you can clearly see the outline of a man holding a radio, which was obviously a tech person or a camera person. They were actually manipulating that REM pod to respond on cue. And I immediately turned off that show and didn't watch it since then. And I like that she brought up that fact about, that was Randy's wine glass, people, if you're hearing the clinking.
Oh, no, it wasn't.
Yeah, it was.
So, I mean, I really like how she specifically brought that up. She didn't give that example, but it shows that she's also aware that, you cannot rely on these things as absolute proof of paranormal communication. So.
Right. Well, when you're looking at somebody who has a 3-season long run and they have so many episodes, I really spent a lot of time. I'd seen most of them. Some of them I went back and looked at, and I'm trying to pick out the ones that really, I thought were the best. I had to laugh. On demand, you can get Nick Groff with a little produced, it's like a 10-minute produced, and he does top 5. So he did top 5 funniest, top 5 scariest, top 5 with the best evidence. It was really interesting because in the top 5 of the best evidence, he had Franklin Castle in there, which is a half an hour from us. So we, it's on every paranormal group's radar here. It's kind of a local legend. And in fact, we're going to have the author who's literally written the book.
And he lives in Franklin Castle. He does tours there, and he's a great guy. And if anybody knows anything about Franklin Castle, it's him. He's been there through renovation. He's, like I said, he lives there. He does his writing there. And we're really excited to be able to talk to him, especially, following up after talking to Katrina about doing the investigation there. And, we mentioned Christchurch Mansion in Staten Island. That is actually an investigation that Dave and I did with our team at the time. And, that was something that, maybe in another time when we get to talk to Katrina again, we'll talk about, because I would have kind of liked to know what her real take was on that investigation, because we had a pretty unusual feeling and situation up there, and we all felt a certain way about it, and I just wanted to see what her take was on it.
You always have to be kind of careful, though. I mean, you noticed one of the episodes, in fact, the episode that I think was probably most compelling was the Monroe House, where they actually found human remains in the crawl space. We talked about that. You always have to be careful, because she did tell us some stuff that didn't make the show. But, there is a homeowner there and a client, and there's all kinds of circumstances that go along with finding human remains. And so they actually went back and did a second episode, and it was really interesting to hear her talk about the stuff that didn't make it, especially with the ground penetrating sonar. But you always have to be careful. And if there was a lot behind that show, it probably didn't get talked about. As a matter of fact, a couple of the shows, when they got some communication and it was a name, and I'm trying to remember where the one was. It was someplace in New York, and there was a mob family, and they got that name. They bleeped out that name. So you can't read it on their lips. They bleeped it out. You don't know who it is, but it's a well-known name in the area. And they were picking up that somebody was shot. So, you never know. I mean, she's got to be careful. So I don't know what she would be able to share.
And it's a mob name. You don't want to be bringing that up.
Right.
The other thing that I thought was kind of cool, too, is when we did our interview with Chad and Alta for Abduction, they talked about the French Quarter and how they met, and that they lived in an apartment that was above a voodoo shop. And they talked about later, after they had moved out in 2005, 2006, something like that, that there was a murder-suicide. And it was pretty well known. It was Zach Brown and Addie Hall. And that Zach had murdered Addie. And so when I looked that up, because I thought it was interesting, of course I'm going to Google it up, and I looked, it said that Katrina and Nick had done an investigation there on Paranormal Lockdown. So I thought that was kind of cool too, that, you know.
And had you allowed Randy to interview her?
Yeah, I might have been able to ask her that had I been allowed to
Well, as you
actually
heard,
ask that question.
she might be able to come back. And, you know, she agreed to come back.
We'll probably
so-
have to set the date without letting you know, or we will never be able to talk to her.
Wow. Okay. Now you can picture the face I'm giving him.
And the finger.
Yeah.
Oh, it's all in the face, folks. It's all in the face.
That's why
and
we
I'm
don't
about to kick his shin.
We don't do video, we do audio.
Yeah. Wait till our next walkthrough, Randy.
Mm-hmm.
You get pushed down the stairs, it'll be paranormal. Not me.
Every time anything happens, they blame paranormal.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly gonna. It's an easy scapegoat. Anyway, you know, she's got an event coming up in Toledo next month, May 11th, Midwest Parafest. For those who live around us, that's only 90 minutes away.
Yeah, it's not far at all.
No, but check out her website. She's got other stuff going on. She's always updating information. And, of course, her new show. And I was not kidding when I said, what the heck are you thinking? You know, portals to hell. Why? It scares me just to say it.
We
Why?
try to stay away from that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, you know, putting yourself at risk for, of course, her mother said the same thing. So, you know, I guess that tells you that I am older than Katrina and feel like her mother. But it'll be interesting to see how that show goes. And hopefully we'll be able to have her on back next year and we can talk about what they've done there and how that's going. But
so what did you enjoy the most about the interview? What did you, Joyce, find the most fascinating?
I thought it was really interesting that, you know, there's no training to be a paranormal investigator.
No.
So I thought it was interesting that she, you know, started out as a kid just doing it and practicing. But then as she went...
I had to laugh or chuckle when she said she was going off on her own down in the basement. It's like, that was so mean.
But you know, the fact that she had crisis counseling, to me, that's an approach of, because we always laugh about being ghost psychologists.
Right.
That's an approach that being able to handle a client that's in distress and being able to handle a spirit that's in distress. I mean, it's logical to have those skill sets when you do paranormal investigation, and it's not something that comes up along.
And it was surprising, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, she's done producing. And I had seen that she had production credit on some episodes of Paranormal Lockdown, and I thought that was kind of cool. But she's produced other things. The show that only made 2 specials, Real Fear, that sounded like fun.
Yeah,
I mean, investigating, you know, horror movies, the real side of a horror movie. I'm like, that's a great concept. That sounds like fun. It's too bad it didn't take off, but, and, you know, she has other ideas, so I'm sure we'll be seeing some of that. But I thought it was interesting that she's done things to basically train for the job when there's really no training to be a paranormal investigator, which is probably why we all came out of the interview and thought, you know, she's got it together. She's a class act. You know, it was just, it was really interesting to hear somebody.
The fact that we do things similar to her, I guess that makes us pretty good, huh?
Toot our own horn. Yep.
And I talked about this before, but, you know, when you go out to become a paranormal investigator, or you think you want to get into this, as we did in the beginning, all you have to model yourself after is the television shows. And so you look at these various TV shows and you go out there and you kind of duplicate that. Unfortunately, in this arena, now 9 out of 10 groups, they're like parrots. They're going out there doing the same thing that they're seeing on shows, but nobody's being creative. And that's what I really liked about Paranormal Lockdown, is because they were being creative. They were doing something different. And to me, I thought that was exciting. It wasn't the same old stuff, the same old goofy stuff. They were actually using new technologies, and I liked their thought process.
And they got a lot of results.
Yes, they did.
You know, we get a lot of results, and we're always kind of shocked. And so when you see somebody else getting a lot of results using some of the same technology we use, but obviously they had a bigger budget, so obviously using better equipment,
bigger
right?
Budget, yeah.
You know, it kind of reinforces the fact that you are using the right steps to make contact and to see if you can, you know, help out a spirit. But yeah, there really should be a book. There probably is a book on how to do paranormal investigation.
There is, but you'd have to, you know, take it with a grain of salt of who that book was written by, or the books that are written by. But yeah, you know, there's no easy answer to that. It's fly by the seat of your pants. And I think what makes a successful paranormal team, research team, are the ones that say no to being parrots. You know, I mean, to me, it's amazing the people that will just spew out catchphrases that they hear, you know, without really saying, okay, yeah, I've heard that before. Like, if I had $1 for every paranormal group that either on their website or somewhere along the line says, oh, it's a residual haunting, and then I love their explanation. You know, it's kind of like a record player. They say the same thing that skips and it plays back. And, you know, they always reference the record player analogy. And it's like, really? You know, it's like, it just seems like what's happening is something was a phenomenon, started with ghost hunters, and which is great. The TV shows help elevate the awareness of this reality of ghost. But unfortunately, this, pop culture that it created.
It's a show, Dave.
Yeah. But the wannabe people out there, you know, donning on the long black coats and the goth and getting out there with their little gadgets, they were just repeating again what they're seeing on TV without putting any thought into it. And unfortunately, it becomes a circus.
Well, this is one of the other keys about Katrina. I think a successful paranormal investigator is going to be a skeptic. Mm-hmm. You have to question the evidence that you find. It may not be evidence of a ghost. You can't figure out, you have no explanation for it, but that doesn't necessarily mean it is a ghost. It just means something's going on.
Right.
So, I think being a skeptic means that the information that you are given or the evidence that you get, you question and try to put into context. Mm-hmm. So whenever you do that, you're always going to get a better result than if you jump to a conclusion, if you don't examine why the REM pod was going off when in the back of the hallway you can see the shadow with
somebody holding a
with the radio.
Yeah.
It's like, I get that it's a show, but when you're serious about this stuff, you're like, there's so much cool stuff that's real. Mm-hmm. It seems like you wouldn't have to do that, but it's a show and they have a allotted amount of time and they have to make all that happen. So, but, I think being a skeptic, having that skeptical eye for whatever evidence you get is critical.
We run into that sometimes too. When you go in to do an investigation and your initial feeling about the place, the client, what's going on, you kind of have a certain amount of skepticism. It's like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. And you see a lot of stuff going on, dynamics in the family, issues going on. Could some of it be spirit driven? Yeah, maybe. But, we've used the term that we're paranormal psychiatrists. And you have to kind of do that. You have to be able to tell what's going on and determine whether or not it really could be spirit or is it just, family dynamics or what's going on in their life. So, yeah, it's something else. When you go out there, you got to have a certain amount of skepticism. You can't just bust through the front door with, your slime machine and go
you
ghost
can,
busting.
But you won't be asked back. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it was certainly a great show tonight. I really thoroughly enjoyed your interview. I know, Joyce, you put a lot of hard work into this interview, and it definitely shows.
I don't think anybody can stalk like you can, Joyce.
Well, somebody...
I'm afraid.
So you better be. Somebody gives up their time for you. You want to be able to actually get some information out of them. We have a tendency, when we talk to other paranormal groups, we start talking and we're yakking about our cases, and all of a sudden we're off and running, which is great. But somebody of Katrina's background, I wanted to make sure I got to delve in, and I was a little fangirl. Stalkerish, yes, okay, but it was
and she fit us in. I mean, she's got a lot going on. She's got all these different programs going on. Her blog, her upcoming new television show. So yeah, we felt honored that we're this new little podcast out there, and she decided that she was going to honor us with letting us interview her.
And I'm telling you, the picture that she has on her haunted kitchen blog is like 1950s pinup. It's she looks really pretty in it, and she's kind of floating in the kitchen. It just cracked me up when I saw it. And I'm like, this is a perfect image for a haunted kitchen.
And where to get the best recipes but from a spirit. Hopefully it wasn't the food that put them there, but
well, we know how many restaurants are haunted.
Yeah.
So that when she said that, I'm like, well, that totally makes sense.
Clients coming back wanting a refund.
Oh man, unless the restaurant's put in a historic building, then you don't know what you're going to get in there.
Well, Joyce, when you're back on the show again, hopefully real soon. Hopefully you're going to be able to tell us how that shortbread recipe is that you're going to try. And you're going to bring some with you, right?
Sure, Dave.
Right?
No problem.
Of course.
I'm not taking any to Randy.
No, I'm not allowed. She'll poison it anyway, so.
There's always that.
Folks, you can see where this is going after the mic gets shut off. But that actually wraps up Paranormal Road for this show, and we can't thank you enough for tuning in. And as always, folks, if you like the show and you like what you're hearing and you see some promise in us, please take time out and subscribe to us on iTunes, Podbean. Also, if you can, on Podbean or iTunes, give us a 5-star rating. And if you write a review, that helps push us up farther. Why do we ask this? It's because the more reviews we get and ratings, the higher we go in the search engines and the more people that can find us. So if you can take that time out and do that, that would be fantastic. Also, if you have any comments to the show or about the show or would like to share a paranormal experience, please remember you can easily contact us by reaching out to us on Facebook. Just send us a message. Or you can send us an email at podcast@evpmediums.com.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun.
Great. And I can't wait to get on to our next project. Every week it's just a new adventure.